Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. I sat in the corner, a quiet hum of conversation swirling around me, but I wasn't really listening. The voices of my family were background noise as I scribbled numbers on my laptop, trying to keep up with the projections I knew no one else would even look at. They were all too busy patting Mark on the back. Mark, the golden child, the hero who had saved the family business, or at least that's how they kept saying it. My older brother stood there like he was the savior of the company, talking about his big, bold decisions that had pulled us from the brink of disaster. But the truth, it wasn't his big decisions that kept us afloat. It was the steady grind, the day-to-day work that no one ever saw. My work. Mark did what he had to do, Jamie. He stepped up when the company was on the verge of collapse. You should be grateful, sweetie. My mom's voice broke through my thoughts, her words like a punch I was too used to. They were all looking at him, proud, convinced. Mark, always the loud one, always the one who got noticed, always the one who was needed. I barely held back a scoff. It was funny, in a sad way, how they couldn't see what was right in front of them. The company wasn't in crisis, it was growing. Maybe not as fast as Mark thought it should, but the numbers were solid, the contracts were steady. The truth was, I'd done the heavy lifting. I'd worked through the numbers and kept things running behind the scenes, while Mark made his bold moves that were just reckless. Across the room, I could hear him mocking me. Jamie's in the back office, pushing papers, not really understanding the big picture. She's the numbers girl. His words felt like a slap. My job wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary, and they all thought I was just some background character in the Mark show. Why don't you focus on the big picture, Jamie? There's nothing to worry about, Dad said, his voice dismissive, as if I was some little kid who didn't know what was going on. I clenched my jaw, tapping a few more numbers into the spreadsheet, pretending I didn't feel the heat of the insult. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't see the truth of what was happening. And it made me furious. But I wasn't going to show it. Not now. Not when I knew deep down that this wasn't over. That I wasn't going to let them push me aside anymore. There was a shift in the room. Everyone was clapping for Mark. They were treating him like a king, and I was the invisible servant in the corner. My parents smiled at him like he was the answer to everything. But I couldn't help thinking, as I watched Mark bask in their praise, that I was the one holding the company together. They just didn't know it yet. I left the gathering just before my mom's dessert table came out, the one she always thought would fix everything. I didn't have the stomach for it. The whole evening had tasted like stale air and fake smiles, and I had a gnawing headache. On the drive back to the office, the anger I'd been holding in all night churned inside me. There was no way to escape it. Not in my car, not in the empty parking lot, not in the cold glow of my desk lamp. I dropped my bag on the floor, my heels clicking against the tile as I headed straight for the company's financial records, the ones no one had bothered to look at. They were real. The stuff my family didn't care about. I opened the spreadsheets, scrolling through the columns, the figures popping up like little soldiers. It was all there, in black and white. Revenue growth, strong contracts, profits increasing quarter by quarter. The company was doing fine, better than fine, actually, but my stomach twisted again as I looked at the damage Mark had done. His wild price cuts were all over the projections. He'd slashed so deep to attract new customers, his impulsive decisions were bleeding us dry in the long run. Maybe it had worked in the short term, maybe, but not without causing permanent damage to the brand, to our margins, to everything I'd worked so damn hard to keep intact. A ping on my phone snapped me back to reality. Mark. Hey, can you send me the latest financials? I'm going to need them for a potential buyer. A potential buyer. He thought he was about to sell this company out from under me. And what would they see in his numbers? A disaster, a sinking ship. They'd see the version he'd twisted into a big picture success story. It pissed me off more than I could put into words. I was the one who'd been keeping the ship afloat while Mark paraded around acting like he was the one holding the wheel. I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I stared at the screen, the numbers taunting me. The financials he wanted, they weren't the truth. I had to give him something, but it wasn't going to be what he expected. Not this time. The idea hit me like a spark, sudden and bright. 2 versions, one for Mark, one for me. I would show him what he wanted to see, the decline, the panic, the mess he thought he'd created. But I wasn't just going to roll over. I was going to keep the real numbers close to my chest. The truth would be my weapon. I opened a new document, pretending to prepare the decline version for him, knowing full well it was going to be a lie. As my fingers typed, I could almost hear the voice of my dad in the back of my head, telling me I didn't see the big picture, that I needed to let the professionals handle it. The way they'd always treated me, like I wasn't enough, like I didn't get it. But this time, I wasn't going to let them win. This company was mine to protect. I finished the fake report first, then, with a deep breath, I opened the real one. I could practically feel the weight of the truth as I looked at it. This wasn't just about numbers anymore, it was about proving them all wrong. Proving that my work mattered, that my steady hands were the ones holding everything together while they were too busy admiring the wreckage Mark had caused. I wasn't going to stand in the shadow of my family's expectations any longer. As I hit save on the real financials, I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't just a financial battle anymore. It was a fight for everything I had worked for, everything I was owed. I wasn't going to be the quiet, obedient sister anymore. The company wasn't just Mark's. It was mine, and I would make sure everyone knew it. I pulled up Mark's contact, my thumb hovering over the message. The last thing he needed was to see the truth, but the last thing I needed was to be ignored. So, I would show him. I would show them all. "I'll get it to you by morning," I typed, already making plans for what I was about to do next. The next morning, I sat at my desk, staring at the screen and wondering how I'd gotten here. It was strange. Part of me still felt the weight of what I was about to do, but another part of me couldn't stop the simmering excitement. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. Mark was about to see the truth, the real truth. I pulled up the falsified financials I'd sent him last night, the ones he'd requested with that smug text. He was expecting them to confirm his narrative, to validate his sale. He wouldn't get that. Not this time. Mark barged into the office like he owned the place, all smiles and energy, practically vibrating with anticipation for the deal to go through. "You know, Jamie," he said, taking a seat across from me, "this whole thing is going to be so good for everyone. We'll be able to move on to bigger things, you know? I've already got my next project lined up. Once this sale goes through, we're all golden." I forced myself to nod, my fingers tapping the keyboard, pretending to focus on the numbers in front of me. It was all I could do not to laugh because I knew the real numbers, my numbers, and they didn't match his fantasy. But I played it cool, like I was just a cog in the machine, nothing more. "Yeah, sure, sounds great," I said, my voice flat. He kept talking, his words floating over me as I typed. I couldn't help but notice the way he strutted around, like he had all the answers, like he was the one who'd saved the day. The truth was, I had saved the company, and he was about to throw it all away for a quick payday. It made me sick. Then, just as I was beginning to process how far down this road I was willing to go, my dad appeared in the doorway, a frown on his face. "Jamie, can I have a word with you?" I stood up, feeling a cold wave of tension wash over me. "Sure, Dad. What's up?" He led me into the small conference room, the kind of room where important things were discussed, where decisions were made. And I knew from the way he was standing that whatever he had to say wasn't going to be a compliment. "We've been talking about the transition after the sale," he started, his voice clipped, like he was already in business mode. "We want to make sure everything goes smoothly." He paused, like he was waiting for me to jump in with some kind of excited response, but I just stared at him, waiting for him to finish. He was looking right through me, like he couldn't be bothered to really see me for what I was. Someone who had worked just as hard to keep this company afloat. "We're thinking of giving you a temporary position overseeing finance during the transition," he continued, his eyes darting around the room, not meeting mine. "But it's a short-term thing, likely to end once we finalize the sale." His words hung there, cold and dismissive, like the company was just something to be sold off, and I was just the numbers person who could be easily replaced. I felt a slow burn in my chest. It wasn't the first time he'd brushed me off like this, but it still hurt. "A temporary position?" I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. "You don't think I understand the business better than that?" He scoffed, brushing a hand through his thinning hair. "You've got the numbers down, Jamie, but you don't see the big picture." He practically spat the words. "You don't understand the market dynamics, the strategy. That's why Mark is leading the way on this. He gets it." I wanted to tell him that I understood the company better than anyone, that I'd kept it alive through the hard times. But I didn't. I just stood there, fighting the heat in my cheeks, fighting the need to scream. Finally, I took a deep breath and nodded. barely holding it together. Okay, thanks for letting me know. He gave me a look that was meant to be reassuring but fell flat. We'll talk more later. He walked out without a second glance. I let out a slow exhale, trying to process everything he'd said, everything that had just happened. The anger was there, sure, but more than that, I felt something else. Something I hadn't felt before. Control. This was my company, and no one was going to push me aside. Not anymore. I returned to my desk, my mind whirring. The sale was happening soon. Mark was too focused on his quick win to see the mess he was making, and my father didn't think I could do what was necessary to save it, but I knew better. I knew exactly what I needed to do. The paperwork was almost done. The second version, the one that showed the truth, everything that Mark had ignored or messed up, was ready. All I had to do now was get it into the right hands. As the time ticked closer to the meeting with the potential buyers, I felt my stomach tighten in anticipation. This was it. This was my move. I was going to show them the truth, and I wasn't backing down. The hours before the meeting felt like they were stretching into forever. I barely moved from my desk, just clicking between documents, emails, and the legal contracts I'd had reviewed by the company's lawyer. It was a whirlwind of numbers, notes, and strategy. I needed everything to be perfect. The evidence I'd gathered had to hold up. Every argument I made had to be airtight. I wasn't just presenting facts. I was laying out the future of a company I had bled for, and I couldn't afford to mess it up. I took another look at the documents on my screen, triple-checking everything one last time. My fingers moved fast over the keyboard as I finalized the revised financials, making sure they showed the truth, how much stronger the company was than Mark's reckless choices suggested. When Mark popped into the office around mid-morning, a cocky grin spread across his face as he dropped into the chair across from me. It's all set, you know. The buyer's just waiting on the final paperwork. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes twinkling like he'd already made the deal of the century. This is going to be huge. I can't wait to see where this takes us. I looked up at him, trying to keep my face neutral, but I felt the anger bubbling up. He was so sure of himself. He thought he had won. I'm sure, I said, forcing a smile. It sounds like a done deal. Mark leaned back in his chair, his voice taking on that infuriating superior tone. It is. Honestly, I don't know why everyone's acting so worried. I've got this under control. He chuckled like it was some joke I wasn't in on. Once the sale goes through, we'll be able to clear up all the loose ends. You won't have to worry about a thing, Jamie. My fists tightened on the desk, but I kept my tone even. I'm sure you've got everything figured out. He gave me a casual wave, dismissing my words, and left with that same cocky stride of his. I stayed seated long after he'd gone, staring at the door he'd left open. It made my blood boil to think that he still believed this was his victory. He didn't know what was really going on. He couldn't, and he was about to find out just how wrong he was. I gathered up the final pieces of paperwork and walked toward the conference room. There was a meeting scheduled with the potential buyers in just a couple of hours. I needed to make sure I was ready. I needed to make sure Mark was the one who looked foolish, not me. As I was about to enter the conference room, I ran into Marcus, one of the longtime employees who had been with the company from the start. He was standing by the coffee machine, a worried frown on his face. Hey, Jamie, got a minute? He asked, voice low, like he didn't want anyone overhearing. Yeah, sure, I said, stepping toward him, my stomach tight with nerves. He didn't waste any time. I heard the sale's almost done. Is that true? I nodded. Yeah, it's true. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. You can't let this happen, Jamie. You know what this means for the company? We're all going to be out of jobs if this goes through. You've seen the numbers. The Hendricks Group won't keep us around, not with all the cuts they're planning. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known the sale would have consequences. I had known that it was a gamble that would cost people their livelihoods, but hearing it from someone like Marcus, someone who had been with us through the tough times, made it hit harder. I know, I said quietly, swallowing the lump in my throat. But it's not just about us. It's about the future of this company. We've got to think long-term, and right now, Mark's putting that all in jeopardy. Marcus looked me dead in the eye. Then you've got to stop it. You're the only one who can. Mark doesn't care about any of this. He's thinking about himself and the money. But we've all worked too hard to just watch it get sold off for nothing. I know, I repeated, the weight of his words sinking in. I'd always felt responsible for the team, for everyone who depended on this company. But now it felt like I was standing on the edge of something bigger than I could fix on my own. I forced myself to take a breath. I will stop it, just trust me. Marcus gave me a searching look, then nodded. I trust you, Jamie. Just don't let us all get tossed aside like we don't matter. I watched him walk away, his words echoing in my head. I had to stop the sale, not just for me, but for everyone who had ever put in the work to make this company what it was. When I finally walked into the meeting room later that afternoon, I could already feel the tension in the air. Mark was sitting at the head of the table, his usual self-assured smirk in place. The buyers from Hendricks Group were seated across from him, flipping through documents. "This is it," Mark said, his voice loud and confident as he addressed everyone in the room. "The sale is nearly final. Just a few more signatures, and we're all set. We'll be able to move forward with the next phase of the company's growth." The room was dead silent for a moment as employees glanced uneasily at each other. Some were nodding, others looking at the ground, unsure of what was coming next. They all knew layoffs were inevitable. It was just a matter of when. I stood at the back of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't going to let this happen. Not like this. This wasn't just about numbers. It was about everything I had built, everything I had protected for years. It was time to take the reins. I was done watching from the sidelines. I was done being invisible. I was about to make my move. I arrived early, earlier than I ever had before for any meeting. The office was quiet still, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound as I walked through the hallways. Everything felt different today. The walls, the carpet, even the fluorescent lights overhead, everything felt like it was closing in. I could feel the weight of what I was about to do pressing against my chest. I had already sent Mark the version of the financials he'd asked for, the ones that painted the picture of a company spiraling toward collapse. He'd be expecting it, probably already salivating at the idea of closing the deal and making his quick exit. But in my mind, I was already thinking of the version I hadn't sent. The real one. The truth. I sat down at the long conference table, the sleek surface cold beneath my palms as I ran through the numbers again, just to make sure everything was airtight. I had the facts. I had the projections. I had the future of this company in my hands. And I was going to make sure that no one walked away with the lie they'd been fed. The Hendricks Group was going to undervalue us. I knew that much for sure. That's what they did. They bought companies on the cheap, stripped them down, and made a profit. Mark didn't care. He didn't see past the dollar signs. He thought this was the end of the road, and it made me sick to think about what he was about to do to the people who had built this place. The door opened, breaking my thoughts, and in walked my parents, looking exactly the way they always did, dressed like the whole world was theirs for the taking. My dad barely spared me a glance, too focused on the arrival of the Hendricks reps. He was already on his phone, nodding along with someone on the other end of the line. My mom, though, gave me one of those tight, "I'm so proud of you" smiles, though I knew it was hollow. They didn't get it. They didn't get me. Mark walked in next, talking to his wife, Amanda, who trailed behind him with that ever-present, cautious smile. He had that same damn look in his eyes, the one that made me want to strangle him and cheer him on all at once. He was certain everything was going according to plan. Little did he know, the game was about to change. I set my jaw and started rehearsing the words in my head. "I know the numbers," I muttered under my breath, barely audible. "And I'm not letting you sell this company for pennies." I could already feel the tension building in my shoulders. I wasn't nervous, not exactly, but there was this energy, like I was on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump and trusting I'd land on my feet. I had to make this count. There wasn't going to be another chance. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and the Hendricks Group's representatives walked in, 2 men in sharp suits, their expressions unreadable. Catherine Hendricks, the one I'd spoken to over the phone, took a seat at the head of the table. She flashed a quick smile that felt more like a sales pitch than anything genuine. "Let's get down to it," she said, her voice smooth but businesslike. "We're ready to move forward, but before we proceed, we need to go over the final details. We need to see the real numbers, Jamie. Mark's given us what we need, but we like to double-check everything before signing off." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I felt my heart skip. I wanted to laugh. She didn't know the half of it. She didn't know that the numbers Mark had sent her were a lie. She didn't know that I had the truth, and it wasn't going to let her walk out of here thinking we were worth less than we really were. I glanced at Mark, who was sitting across from me, still looking smug, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. I could practically feel him counting his commission already. He didn't even know how deep in trouble he was, how little he understood about the company he was about to sell off. I took a deep breath, feeling my hands tremble just slightly as I reached into my bag for the folder that held the truth. I hadn't shown it to anyone. Mark, my parents, no one. I'd kept it locked in my mind, in my heart, knowing that once I laid it out, things were never going to be the same. I slid the folder across the table, the thick stack of papers a weight that felt like it could crush the air out of the room. Before we go over the sale details, I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding, I think you need to see the real numbers. Mark's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. My parents barely reacted, probably too busy looking at the Hendricks people to care about what I was doing. But I didn't care about them right now. I didn't care about Mark's surprise or my parents' disappointment. This wasn't about them. It was about the company. The Hendricks reps looked at each other, clearly taken aback, but Catherine reached for the papers I'd laid out. Her fingers skimmed through the first few pages. She didn't speak right away, just read. The others did the same, flipping through the numbers I had painstakingly put together. I knew they saw it. They saw what I saw. The company wasn't in decline. It was growing. It had potential. It was worth far more than Mark had led them to believe. Catherine set the papers down slowly, her eyes flicking to me, her brow furrowed. These numbers, she started, and I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. They don't match what we were given. Mark's face twisted, his confidence cracking for the first time. What the hell is this, Jamie? He snapped, his voice sharp with anger. This isn't what we agreed on. I didn't agree to sell a lie, I replied, calm but unwavering. This company is worth more than you think, and I'm not going to let you throw it away for a quick payout. The room went silent and I felt the shift, like something had broken wide open. This wasn't just a deal anymore. This was a fight for everything I had built. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Catherine Hendricks shuffled through the financials I had given her, her eyes narrowing as she compared the documents to the ones Mark had sent over. The tension between the two versions was impossible to ignore. For a moment, I thought I might hear the snap of something breaking in the air. Mark shifted in his seat, his face flushing a deep red. I could practically see his mind racing, trying to come up with some kind of excuse, some way to brush off the discrepancy. He opened his mouth, ready to speak, but I wasn't about to let him twist this. This is a mistake, he finally muttered. The words rushed, panicked. Jamie, this isn't what we agreed on. I didn't look at him. I wasn't here for him anymore. I was here for me, for this company, and I wasn't about to let him ruin it. Actually, I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm, this is exactly what's been happening. I leaned forward, hands steady on the table. Mark's been playing a dangerous game. The numbers you've seen, the ones he's been feeding you, those aren't the truth. The truth is right here. I tapped the real financials in front of me. We've seen solid revenue growth, strong contracts in the pipeline. The company is on the upswing. It's not a sinking ship. It's thriving. And if you'd taken a closer look at what's really going on here, you'd know that. Mark opened his mouth again, but his words were shaky. Jamie, that's... No, Mark. I stood, cutting him off once and for all. I'm not finished. I took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of my own heart beat louder now. The moment had arrived. I was done being quiet. I pulled up the graph on the screen that clearly showed the company's growth trajectory, not the decline Mark had painted. This, I said, pointing to the chart, shows the real picture. You've been too busy cutting prices to attract quick customers to notice that the long-term plan is what's working. The company was fine before you started slashing everything. I could see Mark's face go pale as the numbers became undeniable. His arrogant smirk faltered, and I could almost hear the grinding of his teeth behind his forced smile. I don't know where you got these numbers, Jamie, but this is... I didn't wait for him to finish this time. I was done letting him speak over me, done letting him control the narrative. I had the truth. I had the power now. I'm the majority shareholder, Mark. I let the words settle in the room like a bomb dropping. The company is mine to protect. You've been running it into the ground, and I won't let you sell it off just to line your pockets. Not like this. There was a stunned silence. My parents blinked at me, mouths slightly open, as if the words didn't quite register. Mark froze. His mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. I've worked my ass off to keep this company alive, I continued, looking directly at him, and I'm not going to let you throw it all away just because you've decided you can get a quick payout. You're right about one thing. This is your deal, but it's not mine anymore. It never was. I stood taller now, feeling a growing surge of power. My words were calm, but the fire behind them could have burned the whole room down. Mark shook his head, trying to recover. You can't do this, Jamie. You're not even. Not even what? I snapped, cutting him off. Not even good enough to run the company. That's what you've always thought, right? That I was just the bookkeeper in the back office. Well, guess what? You're wrong. I glanced at my parents. My dad's face was tight, angry, like he wanted to lash out. He didn't understand. But that didn't matter anymore. I didn't need their approval to make this decision. Catherine Hendricks leaned forward, her eyes still on the numbers. So you're saying you're rejecting the sale? Her voice was sharp, but there was a flicker of interest behind her words. I nodded, meeting her gaze. Yes, I'm rejecting the sale. If you're still interested in working with us, we can talk. But it won't be on these terms. Not at this price. Not after what I've built. There was a pause, like the whole room was holding its breath. Then Catherine tilted her head, almost considering what I'd said. You're serious about this, she said, a slight smile playing at the corners of her lips, as if she was finally seeing something she hadn't expected. You're willing to fight for it. I've fought for it every damn day, I said, my voice firm, unwavering, and I'm not stopping now. Mark finally found his voice, though it came out in a broken, desperate shout. You don't know what you're doing. You're ruining everything. But I wasn't listening anymore. The way I saw it, everything he'd built was a house of cards, and it was about to collapse under its own weight. I wasn't going to let it happen, not on my watch. Catherine turned to the other representatives, exchanging a few words with them before turning back to me. Well, Jamie, she said slowly, her tone now more intrigued than dismissive. We might still be interested, but we'll need to look at your numbers more closely. If we can come to an agreement based on this, maybe we could find a way forward. I felt a surge of something. Relief, power, confidence. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd made my stand, and the Hendricks group was taking me seriously. The others in the room were still in shock, but it didn't matter. I was the one with the truth, and for the first time in my life, it felt like that was enough. The meeting was over, and the silence in the room felt thick, like it was going to swallow me whole. My parents, Mark, and the Hendricks group reps had filed out in a daze, leaving me behind to process the aftermath of what I'd just done. I'd rejected the sale. I'd stood my ground, even with Mark and my family staring at me like I'd just burned everything to the ground. The worst part, I could feel the storm brewing the second the door closed behind them. I barely had time to grab my coat before my dad stormed back into the office, his face twisted in fury. What the hell was that, Jamie? He barked, slamming the door behind him. His voice was raw, like he couldn't quite believe the words coming out of his mouth. You just ruined everything. I held my ground, fighting to keep my voice steady, even though the weight of his anger was crashing down on me. I did what needed to be done. He stepped closer, his eyes sharp with contempt. No, you didn't. You tore down everything we've been working for, everything Mark's been working for. That sale was going to set us all up, and you. His voice cracked, but the rage was still there, simmering just beneath the surface. You destroyed it, Jamie. You have no idea what you've done. I couldn't hold back the bitter laugh that escaped me. I think I do know exactly what I've done, Dad. I saved this company from being sold off for pennies. I saved you from your precious little deal. He froze, as if the words had physically hit him. His face drained of color, and for a second, I thought maybe he'd finally understood. But then the mask dropped again, and his lips curled into a sneer. You think you saved this company? His voice was low now, dangerously calm. You think you know better than me how this business should be run. You're nothing but a number cruncher, Jamie. That's all you've ever been. You don't have the vision. You never have. My chest tightened at the words. This was the thing that had hurt the most, the way they had always dismissed me, the way they'd always reduced me to just the accountant, never seeing the full picture of what I'd been doing to keep the company afloat while they ignored the mess Mark was making. Maybe it's time you start seeing me, Dad, I said, my voice thick with a mix of hurt and defiance. Maybe it's time you see that I've been doing the hard work, while you and Mark have been too busy dreaming about quick cash to care about the long-term survival of this place. Before he could respond, my mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes already red from crying. Her lips trembled as she looked between me and my dad. Jamie, how could you do this? How could you embarrass us like that? Her voice cracked, the disappointment in it almost more painful than anything my father had said. You've exposed everything. You've destroyed everything we've worked for. What kind of daughter are you?" Her words were like a slap, and for a second, I could hardly breathe. The tears that had threatened to break free earlier now burned my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not now. Not when I was finally taking control of my life. "I'm the kind of daughter who isn't going to watch this company fall apart just because Mark wants to sell it to the highest bidder," I said, my voice raw but steady. "I'm the kind of daughter who's finally standing up for herself and what's right." She shook her head, unable to look me in the eye. "You've betrayed us. You've made us look like fools." "You know what?" I said, my frustration bubbling over. "Maybe it's about time you felt like fools, because for years you've ignored everything I've done. You've taken me for granted. You've treated me like I'm nothing but the accountant in the back office. Well, guess what? I'm more than that." Before she could respond, the door swung open again, and Mark walked in, his face twisted with fury. "You have got to be kidding me," he spat. "I can't believe you, Jamie. I trusted you. I thought you'd at least be on my side. But instead, you've sabotaged everything. If you don't back down, I'm done. I'll quit, I'll leave, and I'll make sure everyone knows it was because of you." I stood tall, meeting his eyes without flinching. "You think I care if you quit? Go ahead. You've already done enough damage to this company. But make no mistake, Mark. You're not in charge here anymore. You don't get to call the shots, not while I'm here." His eyes went wide, and for a second, I thought he might punch me. He was used to running things, to having the power. But that was all about to change. "You're not the CEO, Jamie," he growled. "You don't have the experience to lead." "I don't need your approval, Mark," I replied, my voice steady. "And I don't need your position either. You're being reassigned. You'll be in sales, effective immediately. You'll report to me, and I'll make the final decisions around here from now on. Understand?" The room was silent for a long beat. Mark's face was red, his fists clenched at his sides. But he didn't speak. What could he say? The game had changed, and he knew it. "I'm in charge now," I said, my voice calm but unshakable. "And if you don't like it, you can walk out the door, but I'm not backing down." My dad, my mom, Mark, they all just stood there, frozen in the wake of my words. For the first time, I felt a sense of power settle over me, something I'd never known I had before. I didn't need their approval, I didn't need their respect. I had finally earned it. This company was mine to lead, and I was done being invisible. The first few weeks after I took control felt like I was living in fast forward. Every decision I made rippled through the company, and while it was chaos at first, I knew I had to act quickly to fix what had been broken for so long. I started by looking at the people, the ones who actually ran the company, the ones who made it work day in and day out. They were the heart of this place, but for too long, they'd been overlooked. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about giving people the chance to actually do something with their talent. The company needed a culture shift, and I was going to be the one to make it happen. I hired a new CFO, someone who had real experience turning around businesses, someone who didn't need to be told what the big picture was, because she could already see it. Olivia Davis was sharp, no nonsense, and the first woman in that role since the company had started. She wasn't afraid to speak up, and that's exactly what we needed. She took one look at the financial mess Mark had left behind and immediately started making plans for restructuring. "First things first, we need to stop the bleeding," she said on our first meeting. Her voice was clear, confident, but there was an edge to it. "We're not in crisis, but we sure as hell are teetering on the edge of one. We need better cash flow management and tighter control over expenses. I'll start making those adjustments, but we need to get the team aligned." I nodded, already seeing the vision. We were going to focus on what really mattered: growth, employee satisfaction, and a more efficient operation. I didn't just want to cut costs. I wanted to reinvest in the team. I was going to make sure everyone knew that they mattered. I started promoting people who had been overlooked for far too long, especially women and people of color who had put in the work but never got the recognition. When I called Sarah, the head of marketing, into my office and offered her a senior leadership position, she nearly cried. "You're really giving me this opportunity?" she asked, her voice shaking. "You've earned it, Sarah," I told her, my voice steady. "You've been here for years, and you've done more than most people even realize. I'm giving you the chance to lead. Let's make this company better together." I did the same with Marcus, the longtime employee who had been begging me to stop the sale. He was a skilled operations manager, but he'd always been pushed aside in favor of Mark's flashy ideas. Now he was in charge of restructuring our logistics and supply chain. The changes weren't just happening at the top. I worked hard to implement new systems of accountability across every department. People had to understand that the company was shifting, and if they weren't willing to shift with it, they would be left behind. But I wasn't about to let anyone drown in the process. I didn't want to just make sweeping changes and expect them to magically fix everything. I wanted to lead by example. Mark, of course, wasn't happy about any of it. He sulked in the corner of the sales department, still nursing his bruised ego. He wasn't used to being in a subordinate position, and I could see it in the way he threw passive-aggressive comments around. He was still convinced that he should be leading, that he was the one who knew what the company needed. But now that I was in charge, he was just a cog in the wheel. "Don't think this is over, Jamie," he muttered one morning when I passed him in the hallway, looking at me with that same arrogant stare he'd worn when he thought he was running the show. "You'll regret this. I'm not going to sit here quietly while you destroy everything I built." I didn't even flinch. "You're not running the company anymore, Mark. So sit tight and try to learn something for once." It was a small victory, but it felt good. I wasn't going to let him undermine me, not now, not ever again. As the weeks passed, the changes I'd made started to show results. Employees who had been disengaged began to come alive again, motivated by the sense of purpose I was instilling. Morale started to improve across the board. People who had once been silent during meetings were now speaking up, offering ideas, contributing to the conversation. We were a team again, not a bunch of isolated departments working against each other. The revenue started to rise as well. We found ways to streamline operations, increase efficiency, and strengthen relationships with our clients. New contracts came through, and we were able to focus on longer-term growth instead of just cutting corners to stay afloat. By the time the next quarter ended, we were already seeing a 15% increase in revenue, something no one had thought possible when Mark was running things. And it wasn't just about the numbers, it was about the way the company felt now. It felt alive. People were invested, and that was what had been missing all along. I kept pushing forward, focusing on the work, staying calm and steady. There was still a long way to go, and I knew that. But for the first time, I felt like I was on the right path. This company, my company, was becoming something better, something stronger, and I was the one leading it. Mark continued to resist, making snide comments under his breath or complaining to anyone who would listen. But it didn't matter. I didn't need his approval. I had the respect of the people who truly mattered, the team. And that was all I needed. The company was thriving. The numbers spoke for themselves, and so did the people who now worked here. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. When I walked through the office, there was a new energy in the air. People were genuinely excited to be here, and that made all the difference. I had built something real, something lasting. The weight of it still felt surreal at times, but it was mine now. I had earned this. Revenue had increased by more than 25% in just 6 months, and we were on track for even more growth in the next quarter. I wasn't just fixing problems anymore. I was building something stronger. I wasn't just the accountant anymore. I was the leader, and I was damn good at it. Then, one afternoon, I got an unexpected call. Hendricks Group was on the line again. I'd been expecting them to come back with a lowball offer, but this time, the tone was different. Catherine Hendricks, the woman I'd gone toe-to-toe with months ago, was on the other end of the line. "Jamie, I've been watching your progress," she said, the professional warmth in her voice undeniable. "And I have to admit, I'm impressed. We're not interested in buying anymore, but we'd like to talk about forming a strategic partnership, something long-term. You've turned this company around, and I think we could work together to make it even stronger." I was quiet for a moment, letting the words sink in. It wasn't just an offer to buy, it was an acknowledgement of everything I'd done, a recognition that I had made this company more than it ever could have been without me. "That sounds interesting," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Let's talk." The partnership wasn't the kind of win I'd been expecting, but it was a win nonetheless. They had seen the potential in me and what I'd built, and now they wanted to be part of it. I couldn't help but smile, feeling the full weight of the victory wash over me. But the real surprise came later that week. I was sitting in my office going over the partnership details when I received a call from Arizona. I almost didn't pick up until I saw who it was. It was my mom. "Jamie," she started, her voice soft, hesitant, like she wasn't sure how to even begin. Your dad and I, we've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and we want to apologize for everything. We were wrong about you, about your role in the company. We didn't see how hard you were working, how much you cared. We just, we want to make things right. I let her words sit for a second, trying to push back the wave of emotions that came rushing in. After everything, the years of being overlooked, dismissed, and blamed, it felt almost impossible to believe they were actually saying this. I appreciate you saying that, I finally said, my voice steady, but I need you to understand something. My success wasn't about proving you wrong. It wasn't about fighting to earn your approval. It was about doing the work and making something good, something I can be proud of. I didn't need you to believe in me for it to happen. I did it on my own terms. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear my mom taking a shaky breath, probably wiping away tears. We know. We know now. And we're proud of you, Jamie. We're so proud of what you've done. I sat back in my chair, staring out the window. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe, like the weight of all those years of doubt and silence had finally lifted. My parents' apology wasn't the thing that validated me. It wasn't the thing that made me worthy. I had already proven that to myself, but hearing them say it, hearing them finally see me for who I really was, it was a relief. I accept your apology, I said quietly, but just know, this success, this company, it was always going to be mine. I built it for me, not for anyone else. There was another pause before my mom spoke again, her voice warmer now. We understand, Jamie, and we're sorry we didn't see that sooner. We love you. I love you too, I said, the words feeling real for the first time in a long while. But I have to keep going now. I'm not stopping. Not now, not ever. As I hung up the phone, a quiet sense of peace settled over me. I didn't need their approval to keep moving forward. I didn't need anyone's approval. I'd done this on my own. I had taken what was broken and made it something stronger, something that mattered. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had finally earned the respect I'd always wanted. Not from anyone else, but from myself. Looking out at the city skyline, I smiled. This was just the beginning.